This is our second lesson about the Jewish timeline, which we started talking about last time. And I recommend, if you weren't here last week, that you really listen to last week's class, which has the first half, okay, of the chart. Okay, because today we're going to do the second half of the chart. But this timeline of Jewish history and heritage, and also of the main Jewish literature, at least according to the author of this document, Ronen Rabinovich. And you can find more information on his website, www.odyeda.com. Odyeda means more knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay. Please turn off your cell phone. Turn off mine. Yes, I did. So there are different, what we did last week, and we're going to continue doing this week. Please make sure Inga gets a timeline. At the bottom, we have the Hebrew year. On top of that, we have what Jewish literature was, main Jewish literature was written around that time. And we see in the first few thousands to the creation of the world, nothing was written except for the Torah that shows up, a few thousand years later after the creation of the world. On top of Jewish literature, we have Jewish historical figures. Okay, who are the main historical figures at that time? Very interesting. And we said it's like 98% accurate. There's some, were some issues here, but all in all, it's good. On top of that, we see world events. Okay, what went on in the big world? Okay, it's true. The Jewish people are the most important thing in the world, but there are other things that are also, important, to say the least, and influenced millions of people around the world, if not to say billions later on. So they are listed here as well. On top of that is the timeline of the Christian era, okay? And a little bit over that is very interesting row, which is who has control. I'm sorry, the rabbinical era. Okay, what kind of who has sort of the authority in the Jewish world? Above that is control over the land of Israel. Which nation has control over the land of Israel, which was also very interesting, right, to see. And above that, that big other part is Jewish events, and a little bit over that is Jewish population. Okay, so now go back all the way down to where the Hebrew year is 3761, which is 1 CE, meaning a year after the birth of Jesus. Okay, so you see all the way at the bottom in the middle of the page, 3761. Okay, so if you go above that, it says Targum Onkelos. We talked about that Jewish literature, and also the canonization of the Tanakh, the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. And above that, it says Mishnah and the Zohar. Okay, I think I spoke about the Mishnah, which is a compilation of all the laws that existed around that time in the Jewish world, according to the emergent sect of the rabbis. So you know how we have the Torah, okay, and we have the laws of the Torah. There were also oral laws that were passed on from generation to generations, or the rabbis among themselves sat down and debated the laws of the Torah and debated the different traditions that they had and came up with other laws, sometimes different than the laws of the Torah. And those are considered rabbinic laws. So we have the Torah laws and we have the rabbinic laws. They are not supposed to contradict, but the rabbinic laws are more lenient in the sense that they are not binding binding like the Torah laws. The Torah laws are prohibitions that we must abide by. The rabbinic laws are more flexible. That's what's called deoraita and Rabbanan, if you've ever heard those expression. Okay, deoraita is from the Torah, laws from the Torah that must be abided, and the Rabbanan is like laws from the rabbis. Okay, the Rabbanan sounds like rabbis. Okay, the laws from the rabbis that have more flexibility to them. The Mishnah is really trying to take, which was compiled at the year 219 CE. Okay, it was done by Rabbi Judah, who was the president of Yehuda Nasi, who was the president of the Jewish Sanhedrin, which was like the Jewish court, high court at that time. And he realized that there's just too much information and too many arguments between the rabbis, and he needs to kind of put in writing what are the acceptable laws. It's a very interesting compilation, and we will, as I mentioned last week, we're going to take each of these books and we're going to look at some of the texts, like the classic texts of these books, so we know more about these books. And in the Mishnah, we're going to see a very interesting phenomena that on one topic, there could be different opinions of rabbis. Sometimes it's like just one topic and it's very clear. I mean, one ruling. Sometimes there could be different rulings on one topic. So it's a very interesting phenomena.
So in
Yes.
the Torah, there are laws. The rabbinic laws, are they interpretations of the laws, or they actually created new laws?
Well, that's a very, very good question, and that's a big debate among the scholars and the academia. Okay, and there are different levels of these rabbinic laws. Some are interpretation, some are really thought out by themselves. Okay,
Yeah.
some are kind of like a reaction to something in the Torah. Maybe they take a verse that, and sometimes they even take things out of context, and they kind of like put their opinion and base it on the Torah, but it's clear that they're making some kind of like an improvisation in a way. Okay, what I mean is like they are basing their decision on a source from the Torah.
It's always
In
from
a
the
creative
Torah.
way, in a very
Okay.
creative way.
Alright.
Okay,
Rabbi?
and some, yeah.
So what do you call it when the certain laws in the Torah that they, I don't know, put a fence around it, such as capital punishment or a rebellious son?
Yeah,
We don't literally follow explicitly what it says.
right. So now you're going more into details, Larry, and that's correct. What you're saying, that there some laws, for example, that there's capital punishment in the Bible, but the rabbi sort of like abolished that but not saying the Bible was wrong and we need to do it like differently. They do that by interpreting the law in such a difficult way to execute someone that it basically makes it impossible to do that. Okay, so they become very creative for their own reasons. There's a reason why they want to abolish capital punishment, but they won't tell you that that's what they're doing. You need to kind of like look and interpret and understand that this is what they're doing, and this reflects their values, but they can't contradict the Torah and say, oh, we don't do that anymore. It's like, those like the old days. They don't do it that way. They do it in a very different way.
So is
I
it
have
only
two
the laws?
questions.
Wait, I'm sorry, there was a question there.
Okay.
Yes,
What is
Gail?
the Targum on Kalos and what colors? They have little colored dots. What do those dots refer to?
The dots refer to where was it written, okay? And the
So that corresponds to those little squares. at
oh,
the
no, I'm
top.
sorry. Those are the languages. The dots are the language.
Oh.
You see
okay.
the legend and this on the top, it says language of text. Blue is Hebrew, black
Oh,
is
yeah.
Aramaic.
Oh, yeah, okay, thank you.
Arabic is, I guess, orange, and other languages. Okay.
And the Targum,
The
what is
Targum was written in Aramaic, and it's a translation of the Bible by someone called Onkelos, who's a great scholar and a convert. It's actually someone who, was not born Jewish, loved Judaism, joined Judaism, and was such a great scholar that he wrote this fascinating translation.
So the
Yes.
only question I had was, is it only laws or is it traditions? Like, for instance, Hanukkah is not in the Bible. Is it in the Mishnah? Is it in the Zohar?
Hanukkah is a very good example, okay, of a holiday that happened after the time of the Torah, and the rabbis made it mandatory. They made it like a commandment. Even though it's not in the Torah, they made a commandment to light Hanukkah candles. They're using their rabbinic authority to do that.
Was it
Okay.
in the Mishnah?
Yeah, that is in the Mishnah.
Okay.
Okay.
You mentioned that in the Mishnah, there are different categories of commentaries. Is there a way of identifying that category when you're reading the commentary? Or
No,
do
you have to analyze it. You
Yeah.
have to study it for many years. And actually, my father actually kind of like did that for a while and kind of like identified the rabbis that are more strict, the ones that are more, open and liberal, and the ones that are sort of like in the middle of the ground. And he said, although there was not conservative, Orthodox, and Reform back then, he kind of like attribute, like this rabbi is more like Orthodox in his thinking, he's more Reform, and this one is more conservative. Okay.
My question was, so can we say that Orthodox people follow more Mishnah and non-Orthodox people more follow like the rabbinical law?
Oh, no. That's not what I meant to say. No. The Mishnah is really written thousands of years before there is Orthodox Judaism or Reform Judaism or conservative Judaism. That's something really sort of like everyone kind of like follows the Mishnah. Okay, I'm gonna bring you a copy of the Mishnah. I'm even gonna, if I remember, I'll even bring you a copy of the earliest manuscript of the Mishnah, which is fascinating. And if you remind me, I'll even show you a change there that's very dramatic in its ruling.
Comes from the Mishnah.
That it says, but I'll show you the original. It says in the tractate of Sanhedrin that we're learning now in the Daf Yomi. It says, anyone that saves one soul from Israel, it's like they saved the entire world.
Right.
Okay.
Wow.
But the original manuscript says something very similar, but very different. It says, anyone that saves a soul, like he is like he saved an entire world.
Yeah,
What's the difference?
you could save anybody in the
Any
world.
soul, okay,
Yeah.
not just
Not
someone
Jewish.
from Israel. So later on, okay, someone entered the word from Israel into the original manuscript of the Mishnah, okay, and kind of like changed the meaning, because the rabbis wanted to say if you save any kind of any soul, any human being, it's like you save an entire world. Later on, some people said, it's like, like, let's make sure you like save the Jews or something like that. So they entered that. But the original, okay, this is why you also have to know to go back and learn and read from the manuscripts and see what the original intent of the Mishnah and a lot of these were.
So,
It's like I was just reading yesterday in the Talmud. There's like passages about Jesus that the Talmud discusses that were like just taken out during the Middle Ages because of the censorship. They were very afraid of the Christians, the ones that were Jews and then sort of like left Judaism. There were like some scholars, they knew the Talmud, they left Judaism and they became priests or something like that. And then they told the authorities like, oh, the Jews, they have this Talmud book and it says this and this about Jesus. And then they went and they found out and they took and they burnt books and they, killed Jews for that. So and then the Catholic Church appointed censors on, do you know this? That
No.
they appointed censors on the Jewish books. And they told, someone sat with a Jew and said, you take this out. The next time you print a Talmud, this has to go out. You cannot sell these Talmuds. So we have to go back to the original manuscripts. Very hard because sometimes you only have one manuscript, maybe two. Like because to copy an entire manuscript by hand takes a lot of time. When you print a book, it's like there's a big difference. So you have to go back to the original manuscripts because that's when you find these gems where there are like passages there that talk about, Jesus and and the relationships of the rabbis to Jesus. It actually talks about his other pupils as well. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so now above the Mishnah, you see in black dot there. It says the Zohar. I think I mentioned last week, that's the wrong place to put the Zohar, right?
Right.
Did I mention it?
Who knows?
Okay, the Zohar is the book of Kabbalah. Okay, it's the main book of Kabbalah. And it's been studied for hundreds of years by Jews. According to the tradition, it is written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, okay, who was the rabbi from the time of the Mishnah, okay? And it's supposed to be, therefore, that's why the guy who wrote this chart put it here, because that's according to the tradition. Scholars say that's impossible that he wrote this, okay? And they claim that the Zohar is more like a creation of the 11th century. That's 1,000 years later. Okay, so the reason you would say the Zohar was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is for two reasons. One is because he was like a great rabbi from the time of the Mishnah, and it's like considered, a great yichus to say that. And the other one is you want to give it an antiquity. You don't want to say it's a more, it's just like a book of now. Okay, so. But apparently, it's according to the scholars, in the academia, that's not really possible, and therefore they attribute the Zohar to be written 1,000 years later and by someone else completely, not by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But the Zohar, the way the Zohar speaks, is like it's written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his colleagues. That's why they attribute it to him. Okay. Now, if we go above and look at Jewish historical figures that were at that time, we see
Rabbi Akiva.
Rav Ashi, Rabbi Akiva, Bar Kochba, okay, who was the Jewish general who rebelled against the Romans and did not succeed. We have one woman called Broria. Okay, she was like a great scholar in the Talmud. There are few women that are mentioned in the Talmud were scholars, but usually it's just the rabbis that are like the main players in the Talmud. Judah the Prince, okay, that's the Judah that I just mentioned. That was like the author of the Mishnah, or the editor of the Mishnah. And Rabbi Yochanan was also a great rabbi that lived in Israel. Okay, what world events happened around that time? So Jesus is born, and okay, and that's it. We're gonna go in a minute. In a minute, we're gonna go a little bit more to the right. But if you go above and you look at the rabbinical era, okay, the rabbinical era I was just describing now is the Zugot and the Tanaim. Okay, the Zugot is like pairs, and there were always two rabbis who were like heads of big schools of pupils, and they would teach all these pupils who became also great rabbis. So like Hillel and Shammai that I mentioned last week, so they were like heads of big different schools. Shammai was more strict, Hillel was more lenient. They all had hundreds and hundreds of pupils, and they passed on the Torah from generation to generation. And then the Tanaim. The Tanaim are the ones from the time of the Mishnah. All the different rabbis at the time of the Mishnah are mentioned there. And it's interesting. There's some books that describe each rabbi, when they lived, and a lot of these are estimates. Okay, we don't have like exact dates for that. Control over the land of Israel is really the Roman Empire. That entire time, the control over the land of Israel is the Roman Empire. What were the main Jewish events? If we go up a little bit, so at the year 70 is the destruction of the Second Temple by Rome, right? That's Tisha B'Av, and there's like 4.4 million Jews living in the world around then. At the year 135 is the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which was suppressed. Okay, so we'll go back to the other events a little bit later.
Why is Herod here?
Herod was half Jew, okay, and he was like
The king.
he was a king, and he was a very important Jewish figure. He built the Second Temple. He built Masada. He built the Herodion. He built Caesarea. Okay, he built that, and a few other things. He built like all of ancient Israel. And it's true, he killed all the rabbis also, and he killed all his brothers, and he killed many of his children. Okay, he was a very vicious person. Herod, King Herod. Okay,
That was Herod the Great,
Herod the Great.
because his son was the next one.
Yeah, and so he was very violent, vicious, but also a great builder. So you gotta give him credit for some things.
Where is Herod on here?
Herod is
Kind of in the
where
middle.
it says Jewish historical figures. Kind of like,
Look at the one and go straight down.
I found him.
yeah,
So that was King Herod.
King Herod. Yeah, he was a great king. Did anyone hear about King Herod?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, if you go to Israel and you go to Masada, you hear about everything about Herod. Okay, and he built a second temple also. It's a miracle. People don't know until today how he brought those huge stones. I mean, we know a lot of people probably were killed during, all the workers that he had employed, or slaves or whatever it was. They did, but just the technology they had to move these rocks and put them on top of one another, and the way it was built, it's just unimaginable.
What about the pyramids?
I've heard
Right, the
that.
pyramids, when were the pyramids built before?
The pyramids were built
Yeah, so whatever knowledge it was that they built the pyramids, it would be the same as moving these big stones.
Yeah, perhaps. I'm not familiar with how
Me
that was
either.
built, yeah.
There's a great
No,
documentary
well,
about Herod on, I think it's the History Channel. It's just Google documentary on Herod.
Yeah,
It's really
go,
good.
go home
Jesus
and learn about Herod.
If
It's
you
a
are the
crazy,
Christ.
crazy story. Okay,
Well,
we're going back now to all the way to the bottom to where it says the Talmud Bavli, okay, in Jewish literature. Okay,
mhm.
the Talmud Bavli and the Jerusalem Talmud, which is a little bit above that, are really probably the most important books of in the Jewish yeshiva world. These are books that students and rabbis study for decades. They kind of like have all the information that's from the Mishnah, and they comment on the Mishnah and they build more laws and discussions and their prayers in there and their legends in there, and there's historical information there. It just has everything in the Talmud, and especially the Babylonian Talmud that was redacted in Babylonia is like the one that's been studied all these years for thousands of years in all the Jewish homes and yeshivas especially.
why do you say redacted? Redacted usually means something is struck out.
So I mean it like there is like someone needs to sort of like compile everything. So it's like the editor, but they do have to also move things out. So I don't know exactly what the right term here, but that's sort of like what I've heard that they're called. And the person that's mentioned here, Rav Ashi, that we saw before, he's the redactor or the editor of the Talmud in the 6th century in Babylonia.
And doesn't it also have the arguments between the rabbis?
Yeah, it has all the arguments between the rabbis. And we're gonna bring a Talmud page where you see the text in the middle, and around it all the different commentaries from the different historical eras. Because every rabbi that considered themselves a serious rabbi would write commentary on the Talmud and would ask questions about the Talmud. And they're just eras of rabbis and schools of thoughts that would analyze each part of the Talmud and would try to settle down the contradictions within the Talmud, and maybe try to sort of like smooth the disputes in the Talmud, or there's just different ways of studying the Talmud that were done throughout the generations.
Rabbi,
Yes.
are there significant differences between the Babylonian Talmud and Yerushalayim Talmud?
Yeah, there are very big significant difference. The Jerusalem Talmud was finalized probably around I don't remember exactly, but I think around the year 350, 370, okay? And it was abruptly stopped. It's like cut in the middle because of, I think there was like I think it's like the Byzantine ruling that came, I think in around 393, Rome adopts Christianity. So I think right before that, the rabbis were persecuted and they had to kind of like flee Israel, and they were not able to continue their work there. So whatever we have left from there, and it's partial, it's not complete, and also the discussions there are not as developed as they are in the Babylonian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud had a more a natural ending to it, and was really compiled in a more proper way and edited.
Well, Does it also have Gomorrah or just?
No, yeah, it has the Mishnah and the Gemara, and it's actually, and the Aramaic is also different. There's the Babylonian Aramaic, and there's the Syrian Palestinian Aramaic. Not the Palestinian we're talking about. I'm talking about, the ancient, what the Romans called Israel, they called it Palestine. So the Aramaic there, that, because Aramaic is like English, right? You have like British English, you have American English, you have Australian English. So Aramaic had its different dialects as well.
Wasn't the Babylonian Talmud written way long before the Jerusalem Talmud, like 700 BCE, at the time of the first?
No, not the
Exodus?
Talmud. No, you might be referring to another book, but not the Talmud.
Not the Babylonian Talmud.
Not that early.
Yeah, the Babylonian Talmud is like probably around the year 550. That's what they're estimating. It's like edited around the year 550. Okay. Then if we go up a little bit, we see in blue, it says the Siddur, right? The Siddur is a prayer book, right? And the prayer book is a book that's ongoing. It's never been closed. Prayers are always added to the book. Like unlike, for example, the Bible, you don't add anything, or the Mishnah, you don't add anything. The prayer book has always been evolving and has always changed. But the first time we see an actual prayer book, because prayers were before that, but the first time we see an actual prayer book is around the year, I guess 800. Afterwards, a little bit more to the right, but you go back a little bit then the bottom is the book of Beliefs and Opinions, Sefer HaDeot VaEmunot, by Rabbi Saadia Gaon. Okay, Rabbi Saadia Gaon was one of many. Gaon means in modern Hebrew means a genius. Okay, but in that time, Gaon means like the ruler of the Jewish people at that time. So there's like the Gaonic period is like the people who kind of like ruled. They got permission from the Babylonian Empire at the time to this is already actually the time of the Muslim empire, but it's mainly in Babylonia. And they got the permission to sort of like preside over the Jewish people and be like the Jewish court and take care of all the disputes of the Jews, like an internal government, like a governance system of the Jews when they sat in other lands. Okay, because like the Muslims or the Christians in the Christian countries, they didn't want to deal with the Jews. It was like too complicated. It was like two Jews would come and complain to them, like he did this on Passover, he did this. I'm like, there was like legal issues. So the Jews, they got permission to establish their own, courts and the way they would sort of like preside over people. So
Rabbi, when
the authorities gave the secular authorities in each country gave some Jews the ability to control and rule their communities, and it was usually the rabbis. That's how they had a lot of power, the rabbis.
since where that Siddur is listed, that would be very early before printing. So were there sophists that wrote it, or who wrote it?
Well, that's a whole different lecture about Jewish manuscripts and how things were written. And we'll talk about that, but basically a lot of it was memorized, and then a scribe would put it in writing. Okay, when it was like too much information, or someone would decide, okay, that's it, I finished my work on a siddur, for example. Okay, so they would like put it in writing. They would take a scribe and he would write everything, and then maybe someone else would come and copy it. You would commission a scribe. He would sit down for a few months and copy this whole book and take it, and then there were like few copies circled around the world.
These would have
Okay.
been on scrolls.
Yeah, these would be on scrolls or books that were like, binded, not printed, but they were like, pages that were binded. Bound, sorry. So the Book of Beliefs and Opinions by Rav Saadia Gaon is a philosophy book about beliefs of the Jewish people. He writes different beliefs, etc. The next one, I'm going according to the timeline, is Chovat Halevavot for Rabbeinu Bachye. Okay, you see Chovot Halevavot. Okay, that's more like a moral conduct book. Then we have the going down, all the way down is Spanish Hebrew poetry. Okay, that is actually fascinating Hebrew poetry, which is compiled of two genres. One is like what's called Shirat Kodesh, which is like holy poems, which are like prayers or like, the relationship between Israel and God or the Jewish people and the land of Israel, like things like that. But there's another genre, which is called like secular Jewish poems, which talks about how wonderful it is to drink wine. Okay. And, just the joy of life. And some of them are love poems. And just it's very interesting to see these rabbis that sometimes, could write a beautiful poem.
Is this written in Ladino or in Spanish?
No, these are usually in Hebrew.
Or written in Hebrew?
Yeah,
Or so why they call it
like
in Spanish?
Ibn Gvirol,
Ah,
or
that's
others. Okay, or Ibn Ezra, and yeah, they were in Spain. They're Spanish because they were written in Spain.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, but they usually try to write it in Hebrew.
No, I'd like.
Okay. Now, by the way, you see that some of these books are written in Arabic. Okay, it's called it's like Yiddish Arabic. I don't know how to explain it. It's like they write it in Hebrew letters,
Over there.
but Arabic. Okay,
Oh,
it's like
boy.
Yiddish is written in Hebrew letters, right? A lot of times it's written in Hebrew letters, but it's like but it's not Hebrew,
Yiddish.
it's Yiddish. So they're saying here, like this is like the Arabic that they use. It's Arabic. If you don't know Arabic, you can read I could read it, but I won't understand a word because I don't know Arabic. Okay. So a lot of these books that were written in Muslim countries were written that way. Okay, so the Book of Beliefs and Chovat HaLevavot, and also the Kuzari. Have you heard of the Kuzari?
No.
Okay. Kuzari is a fascinating book by Rabbi Judah Halevi, who talks, it's like a fiction story, okay, that some people say is based on a true story. We have some speculation that it might be based on something true, but it's probably not. About a king.
The Russian, in part of Russia.
Yeah, the Khazarians, yeah.
Khazarians.
Yeah.
Is that the same story?
They say that's them. And it's this king that decided he's going to convert, and he's going to convert all his people into Judaism,
Right.
or maybe to Islam. So he brings like all these scholars and it's like debate in front of me, and the one that gives the best arguments I'll convert to your religion, and I'll convert all my people. Hundreds of thousands of people we're all going to convert. Okay, so of course, Judaism is the best religion. And obviously, this book is written by a Jew. Okay, so Judaism wins the argument. Okay, surprise, surprise. Yeah, and they all convert. But what's interesting in this book is the dialogue between the king, the Khazarian king, the Kuzari, and the rabbi that asks him all these questions, and it's just fascinating to see how Rabbi Judah Levi builds this inner dialogue, which comes from his own mind, between the rabbi and the king on why Judaism is the best religion. It's a fascinating book. It's studied for hundreds of years. I think it's written around the 13th century. And again, also in Arabic. So it's been translated into Hebrew many times.
We were on a cruise and there was a lecture concerning the Khazari. And this guy swore that it was true.
That it was true. Yeah. I know people say maybe.
For him, it
And then the last book I'm gonna mention. No, I'm sorry. Two more books I'm gonna mention now is Mishneh Torah under the Kuzari, and under that is Moreh Nevuchim. These are two. What?
Repeat.
Mishneh Torah
Okay.
and Moreh Nevuchim. These are two books written by the greatest scholar of the Jewish world, and probably one of the greatest scholars of the world ever to live, which is the Rambam, which is Maimonides. And his name is Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. So his first name is Moses, Moses. And there's a very famous saying that from Moshe ad Moshe lokam beIsrael mi Moshe ad Moshe. Like there was no leader for the Jewish people, no great scholar in the Jewish people, like from Moses to Moses. So like the original Moses, like this Moses, like that's how of a brilliant person he was. He wrote many books, but he was like a great scholar. He was also a doctor, so he wrote a few medical documents as well that are used even until today, because he was like so brilliant and he had it all in his mind.
He was respected outside of Judaism because of being a doctor.
Because of being a doctor and a great scholar. He studied all the Greek philosophers and also all the Muslim philosophers. He was interacting with them and he studied them. He knew them all by heart. So Moreh Nevuchim is more like his philosophy book, again, written in Arabic. And that's his philosophy book. It's a very hard book to understand, but it's a fascinating book. And Mishneh Torah is his codification of all the Jewish law at that time. And in a very clear way, he writes all the Jewish laws about things. And he usually doesn't have opinions. He has just one opinion. And his approach was like, there's so many opinions, people get lost so much. I'm just going to tell you what you need to do. And he takes it all. People really criticize him also for doing that. It's like, wait, but there are other opinions. He says, like, I don't care. It's like, enough is enough. Like, this is what you got to do. But he's such a great authority today. So today he's one of the opinions that every rabbi has to go back to before deciding and ruling what to do. Yeah.
He wrote a book which he dedicated to me. It's called The Guide to the Perplexed.
That's Moreh Nevuchim.
Very good.
Moreh Nevuchim is the guide for the perplexed. Yes, and he was a doctor. So
At that time, he was allowed to go into the Muslim world with the doctors and all that?
Well, he
Yeah.
lived in Spain originally, then he moved to Egypt.
He was the doctor of the king. Or the sultan.
Okay, so at that time, they still allowed Jews to.
Yeah, Jews were really the major players in the Muslim empire. They were good. They were like merchants. They were the scholars. They ran the country basically.
They were the bankers.
They were the bankers. They were very. This is what's called the golden age of the Jews was then in Spain and in all the Muslim countries. They were very well respected, and the Muslims and the Jews had very good relationship at that time. I mean, as long as the Jews knew their place and
How did that happen if there was so vile in the Quran? I don't quite understand that.
Because they had a more moderate interpretation, and they said that the Jews are the Amel Kitab, are like the people of the book, okay, and they were very highly respected. They were the Jews that rebelled against Muhammad. They didn't accept. They were like the kofrim, the infidels, okay. But the Jewish people, the rabbis, were very respected by,
Well, except those that they killed, that didn't agree with them.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like a
And then
disorder.
No, the rabbis were smart enough not to disagree.
There's a chance in life.
Did not
That's what they were
disagree,
complicated.
Okay.
Don't speak up.
But I'll
anymore.
teach you to
Sounds like
Um,
Trump.
Okay, so and then let's look at the Jewish historical figures that are at that time. Okay, so we talked about Saadia Gaon, okay, the one who wrote that book. Rabbeinu Gershom, you see it's green. He's in Saadia Gaon is orange, which means he was in Asia, Africa, and Turkey. And in this specific point, he was, if I'm not mistaken, in Babylonia, in Iraq. Rabbeinu Gershom is green. He was in Europe. He was like in Germany.
So we can thank Rabbi Gershom for the ruling against multiple wives.
Right. Yeah. Only because of Rabbi Gershom, we cannot marry more than one woman
At a time.
Yes.
at a time. Okay, there was like a ban. He put a ban, so Jews cannot marry more than one woman. Rashi, who was I think it was his grandson, and was really one of the greatest scholars of all time in the Jewish world as well, just like the Rambam. And he has a commentary on the Talmud, a commentary on the entire Hebrew Bible, books and books that he wrote. He was also he had a winery. He worked in a winery. His daughters are famous for putting on tefillin.
Yeah.
Okay, the daughters of Rashi were like the first early feminists. Okay, then we have Yehuda Alevi, who wrote the book Kuzari and wrote many other poems. He's very relevant for us. He wrote a beautiful poem as well, which is Libi Ani b'ma'arav ve'libi b'mizrach. Okay, I am in the west, but my heart is in the east. Okay, you ever heard that expression?
Yeah.
Right, so that's Rabbi Yehuda Alevi, which means although I reside in the west part of the world, for him that was Spain, okay, my heart is in the east, in Jerusalem, in the land of Israel. So that was him. Then we have the Rambam, Maimonides, in Spain, and the Ramban. Some people confuse the Rambam and the Ramban. Okay, but there's an N. This distinction between them. He was also a great scholar, very well known as well. He argued with the Rambam, the Rambam, and he wrote. He disagreed with him on a few things. He was also a great rabbi and a great authority as well in France, in the area of Provence, in France. Okay, moving upwards, what happened in the world, right? We're just talking about the Jews here, but in the year 570, Muhammad, the founder of Islam, is born. So you could just think about it. The Jews have just compiled the Talmud, the one of the greatest books really ever written, with all these, and the Bible's already written, and the Mishnah, and et cetera, and Islam is just emerging now. Okay, so you just so we have perspective of what's going on in the world. In the year, we said in the year 393, Rome adopts Christianity. Okay, so again, the Christianity until then is really a very lonely religion, persecuted by the Romans. Also, the Jews don't like the Christians because they like split off from the Jews, and they are persecuted. But at a certain point, they are the Roman Empire actually has a debate. He thinks maybe he'll convert. Okay, and then the Christians sort of like convince them, listen, you could be Jewish, but without all the mitzvahs, okay? You don't have to keep kosher, okay? You don't have to put on tefillin, okay? You don't have to pray every day, you could just do it on Sunday. And he's like, oh, okay, that sounds like a better deal. Okay,
I gotta eat fish on Friday.
yeah, I'm simplifying things a little bit, but yeah, he doesn't have to eat matzah, or it's like,
Yeah,
what? I can't eat bread for a whole week.
And
He's
then
like,
it's guaranteed to go to heaven.
yeah. So he didn't want to do all those things, so he
You're
chose
not cursed.
Christianity. And that's sort of like when Byzantine accepts Christianity, that's when really I'm sorry, Constantinopolis.
Yeah.
Constantine,
Constantine.
he was the king.
He
Or
was
the-
he was the
the
king
emperor
that
of
adopts Christianity, right? In the city of Byzantine.
Byzantium.
Byzantium, it's like, yeah.
like Byzantine.
Okay, and then in the year 825, Arabic numerals invented. And let's not forget that the Arabs were also great scholars and brought a lot of advance to science, to math, and that's a big contribution. In the year 868, the first book printed, but that happens in China. Okay, no one really knows about this in the rest of the world. Printing of books, I think, really only begins. What was it in 1300s?
No, 15.
15.
The 15th century. Okay,
Printed the Bible.
and that's the first,
Gutenberg.
right? That's the first book that's printed. So it's only hundreds of years later that the Chinese have the technology and the rest of the world uses it. Sounds familiar?
The big
Okay.
difference was that Gutenberg put the lead blocks in a row for each word. The Chinese had one wooden block for each character, and they went like that.
Oh, okay. So it took much longer.
I think the Chinese historically, one of the problems was the Chinese empire or the rulers. They controlled so much. That it was one of the reasons China never advanced, because they prohibited people from doing things.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So yeah, so really the revolution of printed books that only really begins in the 15th century. That's what spreads Judaism also much further, because then you print prayer books and the Talmud and a lot of these things spread out. Okay, in the year okay, so now we go up. And the rabbinical eras are of the Geonim, and I'm sorry, the Amoraim, which are the rabbis that wrote the Talmud. The Savoraim was like 200 years after them, and they were like commentaries on the Talmud itself. And then the Geonim, okay, which are the Gaonic period. In Spain and North Africa, and then the Rishonim, which means like the first cohort of rabbis that sort of like codified laws, like the Rambam, like Nachmanides, Yehuda Levi, Rashi, etc. Great authority rabbis. And control over the land of Israel at that time, partly by the Roman Empire, then Byzantine, then the Arabs, and the Crusaders for like 100 years, until the Mamluks, a different sect of the Arabs, the Muslims, I mean, come and kick them out and rule the land for a few hundred years, until around the year 1500. Okay, let's go above that and see what happens in the rest of the Jewish world. So in the year 800, kind of like in the middle, Khazar converts to Judaism, according to that tradition. Again, we don't know if that's true or not. Going a little bit down, in the year 1099, the Crusaders conquer Israel and massacre its Jewish inhabitants. but also its Muslim inhabitants.
Question,
Okay,
did the Crusaders originally go into Israel to expunge the Muslims because they were trying
Yes.
to convert everyone?
yeah,
But why were the Crusaders then killing all the Jews?
Because they were Christian.
because they were not willing to be Christians. They tried
Oh,
they
okay.
wanted to
Urged the
convert
converted.
them by force, and the Jews said, no, we don't want to be converted, so they killed them and their babies and their women and everyone.
Well, on their way back, they went through Germany, didn't they? And
Yes.
On the way back and on the way there,
Right,
both ways.
especially him, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they massacred many Jews at those crusades. And at the year 1290, the expulsion of Jews from England and France. 1348 Jews blamed and persecuted for the Black Plague. It happened a few times in history that Jews were, blamed for these plagues and people dying, etc. And that really created crusades or other pogroms as well. And it was like a way for people to kind of like relieve the pressure, instead of going against the authorities that are really responsible for, what happened. So they went out against the Jews.
Now,
So a lot of times it was incited also by the authorities.
were the Jews, because of the way they lived, cleaning and all that, were they actually more free of consequences of the plague? Or was it,
I just read a whole book, yeah.
Uh,
Because the washing of the hands before they ate.
Probably,
the whole book.
yeah. Although I know, I did read a research also that Jews suffered also many casualties,
that was from fleas, wasn't
but
it?
maybe not the same
Yes,
rate.
fleas and the rats.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, hand washing would help, but I'm not sure.
But the rats and the storing of the food, I mean, that was the whole premise of the book. Was very
yeah,
interesting.
okay, interesting.
Because the cleanliness and the kashrut laws, they were much
Mhm.
cleaner,
Mhm.
not because they were trying to be clean, but because they were following the law. of
Okay,
Kashrut and food handling,
Mhm.
Yes, but they were cleaner, so.
yeah.
okay, going up, 1364, Poland grants rights to Jews, and that's interesting, right? Because most of the time Jews prospered in Poland. And it came to, it didn't get to be 4 million Jews living in Poland just, from persecutions. It's just like it's growing. It actually, Poland was a good place for Jews for many years. The ending wasn't so good, but for hundreds of years, Jews prospered there. Although sometimes there were, persecutions and pogroms against Jews also in
Who
Poland.
ran Poland and?
The Polish emperor, that they had their own
The indigenous folk. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the border was back and forth between
Right.
Poland.
Russia and Poland.
Yeah, there's like a whole history of hundreds of years there. And then 1492 is the expulsion from Spain, of course, the Spanish Inquisition. What also happens at the year 1492?
Good old
Columbus discovers
Right, so
America.
you read that theory that he's like
Jewish?
and he had to, but the queen really liked him.
Yes.
So she said, instead of killing you, I'll let you go.
But
Okay,
take priests
so-
with you. But take priests with you.
Yeah, no, but I think he had other Jews
Oh, it did.
on the boat.
Queen Isabella was, that whole Columbus was financed by a Jew in the Spanish court.
Uh-huh. Very
They
interesting.
didn't want to spend the Spanish treasury.
Okay.
And she wanted the gold on the other side.
And then the only part I think I missed was a little bit to the left. At the year 691, the Dome of the Rock is built on the temple's ruins. Okay, so this is like there still remain until the year 691. There still remains of the Jewish temple, but then they come and they move all the debris out, and they build the Muslim Dome of the Rock. On the temple ruins, they actually use some of the temple ruins. You can see it until today. I went on I'll show you pictures one day. I went I was disguised and went into places that Jews cannot go. And I saw, I went to it's called the Solomon Stables, and they built a mosque there. It's like under the Dome of the Rock. And there's stones there from the Second Temple. And we had a Palestinian guy telling us, these are not stones from the Second Temple.
They're just stones.
It was like, yeah, he said it's impossible. And it was like, we were like with German tourists, and like we heard them like whispering. And it was like, what? That's not true. You know, it's like, but like we were like hosted by only Palestinian tour guides could take you there. Like you know, Jewish tour guides, or you know, a regular tour guide cannot take you there. So I'll show you pictures one day. Okay, let's conclude. Oh wow, we got a lot to do here. No, I think we're gonna need a little bit more time next time. I really thought we'd finish, but this is a big. I mean, it's just a little bit of, you know, just like 300 more years. But that's like, you know,
A lot of things happen.
a lot of things happened in those 300 years, right, in the Jewish world. So I think we will finish here today. And
Should we leave these with you?
yeah, so
Yeah,
let's leave
because
them,
they're really
and then I'll give you
wonderful.
it as a